IVM.
We would like to thank Storytel for sponsoring this show. Storytel is an audiobook platform that lets you hear hundreds of thousands of stories on your mobile, PC, wherever you prefer. This week I'm going to recommend a modern classic. It's a story that many have seen but few have heard or read. Game of Thrones by George R.R. Martin. The story is loosely based on the War of the Roses succession fights in 15th century England. When you hear Roy Dotrice narrate the story, it really brings it alive. Go to storytel.com/IVM and you'll be able to get your first month for 99 rupees. That's 200 rupees off the regular $2.99 a month price. That's storytel.com/IVM. Go get it now.
Hello one, hello all. Welcome to the Diary of the Traveling Professor. And I'm Siddharth Deshmukh, your friendly neighborhood traveling professor himself. And guess what? I'm still in London. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing that happened to me, or rather not really interesting, because my flight got cancelled, my Vistara flight got cancelled, so I've had to take a new flight on, which is Air India, so I'll be traveling a couple of days later. So guess what? I'm still doing my podcast from ye old London, where it is still ye old gloomy and rainy. Interesting, isn't it? The bad part about this entire transition, my dear folks, was the fact that I had to take a COVID test twice, because there's a 72-hour rule, which I had to do because of my earlier flight. And then I had to take the COVID test again, hopefully negative again, because I got my first result, which was negative but useless, because it's more than 72 hours for the flight that got cancelled. I hope you got that. It's been one of those kind of weeks, and a very interesting week besides my kind of predicament was the one that happened across a certain Reddit community. Yeah, you heard me right. This diary entry, this post of mine is all about how a certain Reddit community actually held hedge funds to ransom in a way. Well, I've been doing a little bit of reading on what really happened with Gamestop. Gamestop was a particularly run-of-the-mill company, almost nearing bankruptcy, wherein there was some activity by, rich hedge fund managers who were trying to short sell a bit of that stock, the kind of sneaky things that rich investors do in order to gain an additional bit of extra wealth at the cost of poor, uneducated investors. But they kind of did not anticipate the power of the internet, and the day traders on a certain Reddit community decided to take matters in their own hands and decided to kind of counter this move by buying up as much as stock of this particular company as possible. Wow, that was a bold move, and it really created a lot of ripples across a lot of places. I mean, hedge funds were reportedly almost shutting down because of the exposure that this particular, counter punch that came from this Reddit community. And it was really interesting to observe how, TikTok over here in the UK, but all of social media kind of took on the might of these hedge fund managers and kind of stood behind the Reddit community and all the stuff that it was doing. I really think that this community was in it for the altruistic reasons. Maybe they were a little bored. Maybe they were a little bored and they had time on their hands. But the kind of concerted action that we saw, to be honest, from this community is not something that we would have seen before the days of the internet. I mean, these hedge fund managers and these rich investors all have a certain clique and a club, and we all know that. And they kind of are able to manage the stock market for a bit, is what a lot of people say, just by controlling the movement of the way in which they invest and sell certain stocks, right? The fact is, now we have interest-based communities on the internet who can counterpunch this. Interestingly enough, Robinhood, that app that allows you to sell and invest in stocks without actually paying a brokerage fee, suddenly stopped dealing with this particular stock in question, and basically came under a huge amount of fire from the overall community, which happens to just be roasting each and every sort of wrongdoer. Right. So on Twitter, people were saying that they're going to kind of ban or put Robinhood, the app, on fire, and so on and so forth. In fact, some of them kind of questioned whether Robinhood is the right name for that app, because they seem to be stealing from the poor and giving to the rich, unlike the superhero the folk hero, rather, not superhero, the folk hero who was doing things the other way around in Nottingham Forest, the real original Robin Hood. It actually told me a couple of things, and those were the things that I wanted to share with you. One is that interest-based communities are going to be able to form flash mobs like this and look at kind of counter-punching the establishment. We are going to see that, especially post-pandemic, when people have more time and are able to change past behaviors which were predictable. Even though it was the internet, it was predictable, suddenly becomes unpredictable because, value systems have changed. People have suddenly started connecting with each other in different and new and wonderful ways. We did see a little bit of that a few years back in Arab Spring and maybe Occupy Wall Street. I don't know whether this is just another version 2.0 of Occupy Wall Street, but done by somebody else, just done by day traders themselves. But we are going to see some weird counterpunches emerge in times to come. So that's observation number one. Observation number two is around Robin Hood. I think naming your brand after a cool name is all good, but it could come to bite your ass. It could come to roast you like hell if, you do not live up to it. And Robin Hood, when they kind of stopped the, stock sale, kind of brought a class action suit upon itself. Which was interesting, and then they suddenly opened it up again. So they got forced in by the social media community to kind of live up to their name, maybe, or at least not sully the name that they were trying to stand for. So that was observation number two. Observation number three is the change of behavior that we are seeing in communities. What we are seeing is normal communities that exist, which means people following influencers is one kind of community. Then you have your communities on Facebook or on LinkedIn, maybe a little bit, and the rest of it. But then there are these interest-based communities that may be on Quora or Reddit or, maybe even on Twitter and the rest of it, who form alliances, holy alliances, I would say, in the name of interest and causes. And I think that we are going to see more and more of that in times to come. And we're going to see a lot of different behavior on social media. We might see some of these niche players like Pinterest or Twitter, even I would call it, like not as big, obviously, as Facebook, certainly, and Reddit and Quora coming to the fore, creating some new instances of changed behavior that might be surprising to a lot of people who were anticipating smooth sailing, even post-pandemic, just exactly how they were seeing it pre-pandemic. Well, not anymore, guys. We have instances of many movements and trends started right here on the good old internet, and I see this going on steroids with something like this. Well, I hope you like this diary entry of mine. Many more to come from. Hopefully, my flight does take off and I land in quarantine. So the next diary entry of mine after another one from London would be from quarantine in Mumbai, wherein I will regale you with stuff of what quarantine stories should be like. On that happy note, do check out The Traveling Professor Investigates. A bit of a hiatus this week because I am traveling, but we'll be back soon. And follow me on Instagram or on LinkedIn. I'm The Traveling Professor. And if you like podcasts like these, just go to ivmpodcast.com or download the app or just go to where your favorite IVM podcast will be hosted. And on that happy note then, see you on Thursday.
I hope you enjoyed that show. If you aren't following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank the sponsors on the network this week, Storytel and The Whole Truth Foods. Thank you for supporting us. So, great week on the network again this week. Definitely do check out the Pragati podcast. Pavan spoke to Krish Ashok. They discussed science, knowledge, and the wonder of Indian home cooking. Staying in the realm of food, on This Round Is On Me, we had A.D. Singh as a guest. Gauri and A.D. discussed the 10 years anniversary of The Table and the 20-year anniversary of Olive. So two of Bombay's biggest restaurateurs have a conversation about the restaurant business. All Things Policy celebrated 500 episodes on January 27th. Manoj talks to Aditya and Anirudh about the surprising origins of the podcast, its evolution over the last few years, and its exciting future. This episode also marks their video debut, so definitely do check that out on YouTube. On Storytellers and Storysellers, Vineet talks to Ranjit Pratap Singh. Ranjit is the co-founder and CEO of Pratilipi. Pratilipi is a company that's recently acquired IVM, and Ranjit on this episode discusses his plans to build a homegrown media empire, his love for comics, and how India can have its own comic cinematic universe. And finally, Cyrus had an exciting week. We had some amazing guests this week. We had Vishal Gondal come and talk about Fauji. We had Atish Tathir talk about the various issues that he had been facing with his OCI card and other things like that. We had Adam Dow talk about things going on in the US and the evolution of what's happening there. We had Siddharth Kannan come and talk about his history with Cyrus and his new show. So definitely do come check that out as well. And with that, I hope to see you again next week.
Namaskar, dear friends. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. Life, as you know, is a journey. And you and I, travelers, how can we celebrate this travel? I have a podcast for you, Begin the Journey. I share stories and moments from my life. Do tune in every Monday and Thursday to listen to my podcast on the IVM Podcast website, app, or wherever you get your podcast from. Cheers.